We're here. I came to all this time to come to the podcast. I might as well let it rip. So
I went pull out some weed.
No. Yeah, we're more about like getting shredded,
getting
and
swole,
and making money.
Yeah,
like, what
for
are we gonna
sure.
do for
Those
business?
were the two conversations that we instantly gravitated towards. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode. It's a very unique one. Today I have my friend who's going to come sit with me. His name is Matt, and we talk about all things weed related, how both of us got into it, where we were, and what was happening in our lives when we found weed. For him at different stages in his life, and for me, some of you know my story, but we go into more in depth because we've known each other for about a decade, and a lot of that revolved around business and around weed and around our spiritual growth. So we talk about all that in this podcast, and on top of that, we also talk about how weed can slowly creep up and sabotage your success if you're not careful. And towards the end of the podcast, you'll hear us talk about the 5 pillars, which are very important, and as well as how you can create the right set of situations and a vibe in your life where if you do end up consuming weed, it adds to that experience and it doesn't take away from it. So there's a lot of good nuggets in this podcast, and for all of you that are part of the Better Yourself community, I really hope you find this episode helpful. Let us know what you'd like to see more of, and we're happy to get Matt back on the podcast. So without further ado, let's get right into this episode, and I'll see you guys at the end. I feel like when we met,
Has it been that long?
It's been about a decade now.
That sounds about right.
2022 now, and we met in 2012, I think.
Okay.
Holy shit.
And now we're doing...
And now we're finally doing a podcast.
Yeah. Just took a decade.
But there's a lot of things I want to cover in this conversation, but we should probably start with talking about how we met, where we were in our life at that time, what we were like. You could paint some colors about me. Ooh. I can talk a little bit about you. Then I want to navigate to how weed was in the picture for me a little bit later in that time frame, how meditation came into the picture, how all that kind of transformed or metamorphosized both of our lives in ways that pretty hard to talk about, but we'll do our best today.
So basically, back when I was married, I was married for about 15 years, and during that time, I had 3 kids, got started kind of young. There came a time where my ex-wife was like, I want to have a life, like I've just had these kids and I want to do something with my life. So I said, okay, what do you want to do? She said, I want a career. And I'm like, okay, then you got to go to school.
Yeah.
So then she started going to school, and it was so strange being, I think it's been 10 years or so. I was about 36. And I remember her saying to me one time, hey, there's a college party I want to go to. And I was like, she said, you won't like it. Because, here I am, 36, people in college are 18 to 20, whatever, right?
Yeah.
She said, oh, you're not going to want to go. But I was like, no, I want to go. And she said, okay, but, people could be dancing there. I said, I know the Macarena, you know what I mean? Like, I'll do it,
I could dance.
whatever. I'll dance or something. Then she said, well, they might be drinking, and I'm not a big drinker. I said, well, maybe I'll have a beer with someone. And she said, yeah, they might be getting high. And I was like, I'll definitely puff on some of that, And at the time, I wasn't really smoking much. I was really like Christian at the time and heavily involved in the church and church type stuff. And so there was just a long season there where I didn't smoke. But I was like, shit, I could smoke one tonight, So ended up coming to the party, and it was your place.
That's right.
You were the host of the party. And so not only did we just have a great time, but I met you there, and we just seemed to hit it off and we just did it up and had an awesome time. And so one of the least places I expected to make a connection or anything, I was just going to try and support my ex-wife at the time and see what this was all about, and ended up at a college party. So we could say we met in college.
Met in college. For sure.
But we are, how old are you now?
I'm going to be 30 in this month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm about to be 47, so about 16, 17 years apart. So here we are in college.
And we just connected on so many things. From that day, we were both interested in, I was really into bodybuilding at those times.
Yeah, this is before meditation for me.
Never heard about yoga or meditation. I mean, I heard about it maybe, but I never knew about it, didn't understand it, thought it was kind of weak.
Yeah, we were more about getting shredded,
getting
and
swole,
and making money.
Yeah,
what
for
are we
sure.
Do for
Those
business?
were the two conversations that we instantly gravitated towards. And I remember a few times while I was competing and really in my zone, you came out to UCI and you took me out for lunch, and you kind of want to check up on me. How am I doing? Because I was You took one of those iconic pictures of my college apartment where I had probably 50 protein tubs on the top, and people were and I was just jacked, and I was like, what are we doing?
It was all about bodybuilding and making money, because I just sold a business.
Yep.
And so I was high on that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to try and like start one in India. And I was like trying to
We were
start
trying to
it
figure
all
out
over,
how
like,
to do
are
it
we
over
gonna
there.
export this
Oh
to
my
India,
God.
dude? Yeah.
God.
And yeah, and lifting. So I really admired your lifting career. And I was like in the middle of my own physical transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I was just beginning it now that I think about it. Because 36, if I was 36, so I was just starting a physical transformation. I weighed around 230 pounds or thereabouts. And I'm well, today maybe like 191 or something. But yes, thank you. But I was just getting started on that. So it's like I had all the typical, advice that you get from just the mainstream bro science and all that. So when I met you, I think that was one of the things that really keyed off to me as I saw that you were training for this, competition, and I saw the protein. I saw you were just jacked, and I was like, dude, what are you up to? Tell me what your techniques
what are the secrets here?
What are you doing here? From my perspective to you, and then I felt like your perspective to me was more like, wow, this guy just sold a business and he seems to be doing well and he's putting his wife through college. And what's going on?
What's going on here? How does he do this?
So I wanted some information from you, and you wanted some information from me, and it kind of just.
I felt like that was what's been beautiful about our relationship for this last 10 years that we've known each other. It's always give and take. There's always. I never felt like you were some older dude or anything. I never felt out of place in a conversation with you. That's what I really enjoyed about getting to know you more and more throughout the years. And, if I were to just fast forward from that point on, I remember after I'd completed college, I decided, I wanted to go start working. I went to school for computer science, right? Went and studied for that. And as I was competing, Matt actually came to my bodybuilding show back in the day, by the way. He was one of the few people who drove, I think, like 2 fucking hours to LA, stuck in traffic. And he was there. He's like, bro, I'm here. I'm here at your show, man. And he was back there like cheering me on. And
that was awesome.
It was a whole thing. So I always appreciated your support and all the things I did. And then once I started getting out of college and wasn't bodybuilding anymore, I moved up to the Bay Area. This is where weed comes into the picture, by the way. So I moved up to the Bay Area. I started working as an engineer, and I like instantly realized I hate this shit. I'm like, this is awful. I don't like this at all. I'm stressed out. This is not what I like wanted to be doing. I love technology, no doubt about that. But I just felt out of my element. Like I was more like gravitated towards people talking about things and like getting things moving in that kind of way, not like sitting there and writing code all day. It wasn't. It was something I felt like I had to do at the time, but it wasn't what my forte was.
Well, there was a little season of like where I didn't see you, or obviously I didn't see you because you lived up there, but we didn't talk that much. And the few times I talked to you, you seemed very like down, like down. Depressed, down, and a lot of it had to like do with weed. And that's really when we actually started like really talking about weed a lot. That's when we really started talking about weed. I also had invested in a semi-legal grow. We'll call it for a podcast. It was a legal grow, but I invested a ton of money. I don't even want to say how much. It's embarrassing. In a indoor grow. Yeah. And so at the time we were talking about weed. We're talking about selling weed. We're talking about
because I was interested in making money from anything. So I was
anything.
like,
You were trying
how
to get
can
your
we do
hustle
this?
on.
Yeah, I was like, what are we flipping? What are we doing? How are we doing this? I was in the circle with the Bay Area people up there because we'd actually, so to kind of give back to that like story, because I was so stressed out in my life, not happy being an engineer, and I didn't know where to go. Yeah. And I couldn't really drink every week. It was first, I was super expensive in San Francisco. Yeah. And second, it's terrible for you, right? And when I was introduced to weed, I was like, wow, this is fucking great. What is this? So first it was the vape pens because they have no smell and they're easy to discreet. You could hide them, take them wherever. And I started just getting high on that. And I was like, man, this is great. This makes me feel so good. There's no hangover the next day. Life is great. But as that usage kept going up, because it was my way of coping through that hard time, I think I found myself in a place where I found, okay, I'm really driven. I know I want to do big things. Yeah. And that's when I think I started connecting back with you because I'm like, okay, dude, I think weed is the best thing there is right now. And I knew you had connections with that type of business. Yeah. So we started talking again about like, what can be done? How do people make money in this? And like I was talking to growers up there who were doing wholesale distribution, and this is before the legalization or in the state of California.
Yeah, there was the medical.
Yeah, medical was legal.
It was a more gray area. You know what I mean?
It was a gray area, but we were exploring those topics, and then I think when you and I started talking about it, I was getting to a point in my consumption where I was just doing way too fucking
Is that
much.
really when you started smoking? Was the Bay Area or in earnest? I mean, you may have puffed it 1 or 2 times.
I don't remember if I ever puffed anything in college because I was so into bodybuilding. Not
Yeah,
that wasn't,
I don't remember you smoking nothing
I was
at that
not
party.
into
You
shit.
were probably eating boiled
I mean, I was
chicken.
taking some other stuff, but
Yeah,
some
yeah.
PEDs, but that was about it. But I
On the
thought
gear,
stoners were like losers essentially. I thought weed was
Yeah.
horrible. It stank and it had no purpose in life. I was like, what the fuck? Why would you ever smoke weed? Until I like started smoking weed, and then I was like, bro, this is the best thing. Where has this been my whole life?
Yeah, I feel like I should tell my weed origin story
Please,
because
please,
I
please.
almost feel like when you tell yours that a lot of them have the same origin. Like it's a very similar origin, and like if I'm gonna break it down, it's gonna
Yeah.
go like this: like either weed was taboo. For me, it was like this: weed was taboo. Eventually, I tried weed, and I realized they were lying to me
All the
about a
taboos
lot of
bullshit.
shit.
Yeah.
And then because I understood that they were lying about that, especially growing up on the just say no and all this shit and religious and it's the devil's this and that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you finally have some when it's okay to drink. So you finally smoke weed and you're like, didn't get a hangover. I actually got better sleep. I feel more relaxed. They lied to me. And so what do? Like most people, we just decide to go head over heels into the whole
If
thing.
one is good, 10 is better.
And so you're like, F this, I'm going to start smoking weed. And so for me, like from age, 0 to 19, I was dissuaded from smoking weed because in the Christian church, they're like, oh, you're going to deal with the occult and the devil and this and that. Like you can get drunk off your ass, you know what I mean, to be throwing up before church. And that's somehow somewhat okay. It's still not okay, but John just had a rough night, but God forbid you smoke a joint and relax. It was an awful thing.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I had all this like fear about weed. And in high school, I was on like a band trip and I saw a kid smoke a bunch of weed and cough so hard he threw up. So that made me think that weed makes you throw up. So I was like, oh no, I don't want to do something that makes me throw up. So even in high school, I was a little, I don't know. So then fast forward to, I have a degree in jazz guitar performance of all
Which is a hidden talent of
useless
his, by the
things.
way.
Yeah, I don't play as much anymore. But back then I was playing a lot. And so I was with a band with some people. And at the Monterey Jazz Festival, I was playing at the Monterey Jazz Festival in a student band. And 19, this kid comes up and he's like, oh, I got this weed. And I don't know what it was, but I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to try it tonight. I felt like a safe environment. I was like, oh shit, I hope I don't get ill. I hope I don't. Who knows what will happen?
you don't
It was
know
like
what's
this
gonna
big
happen.
adventure.
Yeah,
I'm in a hotel right across from the fairgrounds where the Monterey Jazz Festival is, that whole vibe. So then I took a puff, and all I remember to this day is I had the best fucking time. I had so much fun. I woke up the next morning feeling like a champ. And when I woke up, I was like, thought I would have a hangover. This is how naive I was about it. Like, I had no idea. There wasn't near the research or, the internet as much to say what's going on. And
You couldn't just talk to other people about it either because
it's in the 90s,
well, even I would say even in the recent years, there weren't enough places where you could go and conversate about weed. It's either people are just heavy stoners and all they'd want to do is advocate for it, or they're completely against it. There was really no middle ground of like talking about it like we're trying to discuss it today.
There was no open dialogue.
There's no open dialogue.
Because of this, and because I woke up without a hangover, I immediately the next day said, I am now a stoner. Like I declared myself.
Dude, for real.
Fucking, let's go get that shit. We got in the car. We drove to someone's dealer in Monterey and we bought as much as we could get. And pretty much from that point into my 20s, I smoked every fucking day. Like, I mean, in college, I was wake and bake. And for me, I did it because I was like, well, obviously it's not affecting me. I passed all my classes. I sat there one time and wrote a term paper on the history of like the Christian church or something for a history class in a recliner with a laptop, just smoking 3-foot bong loads while watching the whole Star Wars,
wow.
At that time, 3, 4, or 4, 5, and 6 or whatever, so I'm watching Star Wars and then turning it in, like crunching it the night and getting a B, you know what I mean? Or getting an A and being like, yeah, weed doesn't affect me.
Weed is great.
Yeah. I didn't really feel like I would see people that you would call stoners or losers who were tired, but here I was like, passing my classes, getting up, and doing all this like functional stuff, So I thought, what's the harm in it?
Yeah, that's so funny. The parallel is exactly like my story because when I was getting into weed, I was already making $115,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I was like 25.
Yeah, I'm successful.
I was like, every fucking person looking at me is like wishing they were making this kind of money. Yeah. And I was by myself. So I was further away from family, didn't have a lot of friends. I wish I had more friends around.
Yeah.
So part of it was like I was by myself, and that was one way I found to enjoy was getting high. But then I was still like working pretty hard and found a good way to escape from like the stress that I felt. And I also realized like, okay, if this isn't really doing any harm, then I think I'm just going to continue this habit. And I remember, we're both kind of like this. We're like, we tell everybody if something we find is great.
Oh yeah.
I was convincing everyone that I knew about how great weed is and how they should all get high with me and we should do this together. And I had a whole array of
community.
Yeah, I wanted to create a whole vibe with me. I bought the volcano. I bought all the fucking products you can imagine.
You had the money to buy the good shit.
I had the money to buy the good shit, so I'm buying the German vaporizers and you're buying ounces or half pounds or whatever shit at a time because you're like, oh man, that's some good purple, man. How much can I get a half of that or what? Like how much is this? So always having just a lot on hand. But it was funny because at that time, I would have never been convinced out of my mind like I should ever even consider taking a break or stopping weed because I just couldn't see the downsides of it.
Yeah, what's the downside?
Right.
I mean, weed doesn't, at face value, and to me, that's what makes it so deadly. But it's not deadly in that sense. But to me, that's really the hidden thing in it, and we'll get to that in a little bit, is there doesn't appear to be a downside because you're like, how am I not? Other than like, maybe I want to munch too much. And some people don't munch, but other people, they want to order that late night pizza or something, but some don't. So you're like, okay, I'm not really seeing, and with the whole war on drugs and everything too, it's just making you, and if you're more counterculture, like we might be, or not just believing the whatever narrative that comes out, you're like, dude, we've been lied to. This stuff is awesome. People use it for cancer. They use it for this. They use it for that. So why can't I just use it, So I ended up smoking, like I'm talking like wake and bake, dude, all through college.
Yeah.
All in because I was involved in music. Everyone
it's the same thing. I was waking up before brushing my teeth. Next to the sink, I had a dab rig, and I'm taking a dab before brushing my teeth.
You went
it's
even
fucked
deeper.
Up, bro.
Dab.
Literally taking a dab.
Wake and dab.
Wake and dab. And then Mimi used to come up and visit me every once in a while, like once a month for the weekend.
Like, I can't believe she saw that.
I know, like, dude. I'm surprised she's still with me. It's a shocker. I would have a volcano next on the right side of my bed. There'd be times where I'd be waking up in the middle of the night, blowing up a bag, and just smoking weed, and then going back to bed and like waking. Like I had a volcano always
just
hot,
constant.
Like because those devices are desktop, so this always on temperature, ready to take a hit. So I was like. I thought it was a little crazy what I was doing, but at the same time, like we were talking, like you don't see what is the downside of this, and you're like, why would I want to stop?
Let me tell you a little downside that happened to me now that it's actually triggering my memory now.
That's good. I'm glad.
Because I'm like, now that you mention it, in college, at the end of college, I had a downturn. And I'm not the kind of person to get depressed, and it's one few times, maybe 3 times in my life, I can say I've actually been depressed, and I got into a depression. And I had graduated college and I was playing music and it wasn't as fulfilling and I was getting high all the time. And I just remember I just started getting depressed, man. I didn't know what it was or why I was or what to do. Like I just hit this real crisis in life, And I remember at that time when music wasn't working out, I mean, it was working out, but not paying enough, like I wasn't like at your age making that kind of money. I was making peanuts. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move. This was back on the East Coast, New Jersey, New York area. I moved back to California. And that's when I kind of like got like resaved again. I started going to church, like kind of the origin of where I was at before. And I was like, maybe it's the lifestyle I'm leading, So I was like, went almost back to like weed is bad. Not necessarily that it's bad. Like I never went back to how I thought about it before, but I just had to change my lifestyle. Yeah. And I remember thinking after smoking every single day, once you make it out of the first 2 weeks to 4 weeks, it's kind of like being sober was a new high. Like, oh my God, like everything seems amazing. Like,
well, you've just spent so much time cloudy, and you finally start
that
to
becomes
see
your
clear
new norm.
Again. It's like your short-term memory is all you have available to you, and if in the last like 4 weeks you've only gotten high, you don't know what the fuck is behind that. You've never, you forget. So it's all you know. And I think what you're saying, it was interesting because the first time I thought I had an issue with weed was I was calling my mom, and she's in the medical field, and I was like, Mom, I don't understand. I'm waking up, I'm really nauseous. And I told my parents that I was smoking weed.
Yeah,
they didn't know so much about weed, but they were like, okay, like they understood how stressed out I was, and they were like, okay, if it's helping you, that's fine. Just don't like go overboard. Obviously, they don't know I'm taking dabs before I fucking brush my teeth. That's a different story. But I was telling her, and she was like, there's been a bunch of cases coming into the hospital of teenagers and young adults who come in because they have nausea and they're vomiting, and they do all the full panel tests on them, and they don't find anything is wrong. Weed, and then they'll say, well, what is the issue? And a lot of them, those kids are not telling the doctor that they're smoking weed also.
Yeah.
And it turned out it's CHS, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which
Yeah.
is a toxicity that develops in your system from too much weed.
Yeah, you're just building it up.
And I was like, oh fuck, maybe I got to slow down. Like that was my first indication of like
just something.
hitting some effect where you're just like, okay, I think I need to slow this down. And then you started to, because I moved from starting with solvents and like the dabs to first realizing that's way too expensive, right?
Yeah.
To go into like, okay, what's the alternative? Okay, flour, and then you're rolling joints and blunts. You're like, that's too much weed being used to get high. To then finally go into the drier vaporizer stuff, like with the Volcano and the Mighty, because it's a small amount, and it's basically like taking the plant in its raw form and vaporizing. And that was like the conclusion of like, hey, this is the best way to do this if I'm going to continue this habit.
Yeah.
And I think almost like 3 years into, or let's say 2.5 years into doing like weed every single day, I was getting to a point where I wasn't working out like I was before. I was just, every time after work or whatever, I just want to get high and like enjoy myself.
Yeah.
And so my habits started to shift. So it's more smoking habits, less active habits.
Yeah, but let me just interrupt you one second because I want whoever's ever going to watch this to realize we're talking about this years like it was, we're talking about it quickly.
Yeah, we're talking about it fast.
But when we're talking about a habit shift, that's the sneaky shit about weed, is the shifts come like very slowly. You know what I'm saying? If you want to go take fentanyl, it's like, you know what I mean? If you even get up again, you know what I'm saying? Or some kind of heavy ass
drug. It takes
drug.
years to notice anything.
Yeah, that's what makes it so fucking sneaky is you get in there and you start smoking and you feel great. And it's like a long-term loft. Like, and I know people who have gone 40 years long-term loft, and they don't even realize how low they've gone in terms of like, maybe you still go to the gym, but you don't lift as hard. Or it's just a very slow thing.
Your complacency level goes higher and you don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, so I just want people to know when we're talking about these shifts, these are not quick shifts like you just wake up one day. I mean, you woke up one day nauseous, but it's not a quick shift in the sense of your daily lifestyle habit, and even more so your energetic level and your ability to just be perceptive and aware what's going on inside yourself and others. That's all being muted, you know?
Totally.
Like you're getting, your perception is being muted. I don't want to say dumbed down because sometimes you actually have better auditory perception.
I think it's part of it also is like, I think you and I probably both got to a point, and we can talk about it now instead of when we were in that place where there was some sort of in my life at least, a spiritual void I felt that I was also feeling by getting high continuously. It was like trying to reach this elevated state of perception, but if you do it every day, it doesn't work that way. Like it's like you can't reach the same place every time. Yeah.
In the beginning, it elevates your perception, but then several years in,
you're like, what am I doing? I'm like, it's like cigarettes. I just smoke now.
Yeah, and it even has, we know it. You build up a tolerance. It doesn't even do what it used to. So I used to take tolerance breaks or whatever, but then I had a period where I got heavily involved in Christianity and got really into, preaching, teaching, and holding small groups and this kind of thing. And it wasn't so much a morality for me, although other people were against it. Maybe I'd smoke once a year or something, but it just wasn't in my realm, in my friendship circle. They drank. And so I didn't smoke. So there was literally years I went by where it's like weed was a long, forgotten
so
thing.
This is after you had started for a while, and then this was like
I started from like 19 to 26, like every day, all day, never miss a beat. And then at about 26, 27, when I got married and had my first kid, I was just all about work. Then I turned into like make money. And occasionally I would smoke, but I didn't even know where to get it. Like I didn't even have a dealer. I mean, there wasn't a dispensary like that I knew.
Yeah, not like today.
Yeah, it's not like today. So I went a whole season without smoking it at all, And so that in a way was beneficial. But even if you do that, I found later, once I got into business for myself and got involved in investing in this type of stuff, and then went into businesses that were kind of, we'll say, synergistic for now with marijuana, then I started smoking again. And it was so easy to just begin that whole cycle over again.
Yeah.
So you would think that after like smoking every fucking day and going through these years and having that experience, that I would have actually used that experience. But instead I just stopped and forgot all about it. And then when I started again, I went through the same cycle, not so much feeling lied to, but in the sense of, like, I think most people could say, you start and it's awesome. You keep doing it and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You keep doing it, it's a little less awesome, but still feels good. And as time goes on, you just realize that you just do it.
That's such a good way to put it.
And then if you really realize, you get to a point where you realize you're not achieving the goals you wanted. You're not doing the things you wanted to in life. And you have no idea that it's the weed.
So that point I'll take and run with, because for me, almost 2.5 years into smoking, because I was very driven and I was trying to make shit happen.
Yeah.
But everything I was doing wasn't working out. And I'm like, what the fuck is the problem? Because
Yeah.
I'm doing everything that I can think of and it's not working out. But it was that I was instead just getting higher and thinking that I'm doing more than I'm actually doing, because my perception was off. I didn't have like a sanity check anymore because I'm always high. So I was just realizing that I was hitting these roadblocks. And I think that was a catalyst to lead me towards like that really depressive phase where, I have to throw in some context here, because at that time I've always been into self-improvement. So I was always looking up at like, Tony Robbins and people that were talking about how to like be your best high performance
whatever's
self.
out there.
Because I had just finished bodybuilding, so I already know how to be physically the best, but I wasn't in that phase of my life anymore. Now I'm trying to be more like financially and business wise successful.
Yeah.
So I'm looking up to those people. But then I was hitting a wall with that, and somehow through like another friend of mine, we started talking about like how like meaning of life and bigger picture things. And that's when like videos of like Muji started popping up and Sadhguru started popping up in my feed.
Yeah.
And I remember like watching some of those really high, and one of those clicked for me where Muji like gives you this understanding of you are not the thoughts in your head, because you're like, wait, what the fuck does that even mean? Nobody has ever told me that before.
Yeah.
And it just shook me up completely at that time. And from that point on, I started to realize that I became almost like stunned into becoming aware of everything I was doing. And I was like, wait, why am I smoking so much? What is this doing to me? And like, I started questioning everything more than I had ever before. And that actually spiraled me into a really low state, because I was trying to cut back on weed and it was very hard and I couldn't do it. And one point I decided, because I was growing and stuff, I literally killed off all my plants 3 weeks before they were flowered completion. So I was like, fuck this. I'm done with this. I had decided no more. I'm going to get better. I can't be like doing this anymore to myself. So I cut everything off, literally threw it in the trash, took all the rigs down and everything. And then I didn't realize that the last 2.5 years of me using it so frequently was going to lead me to this path of now I'm super anxious, really depressed.
Yeah, what the hell is going to help you now? Because there's some therapeutic benefit to weed, right?
So now I've like cut the cord, and I'm like, what do I do now? And this is like before I had done meditation, but I was still listening to Muji because it somehow gave me some it helped me in some ways, but it also sparked up so much uncertainty about.
Yeah, it stirred up a bunch of stuff.
It's like in spiritual terms, he would say like, your ego is going to fight back even harder now that you're starting to wake up a little bit, because it realizes that it has no place in this.
But let's pause for a second.
Yeah, I'm going too fast, maybe.
No, you're doing fine. I mean, you're fine. I just want to say that what's interesting in listening to you say that is that weed can actually get you to a place where you understand you don't need weed. Like weed does make you want to think about the meaning of life, and you sit there with friends and go, whoa. But a lot of times you're just so your perception is so low that you can't make that leap to the next conclusion.
Yeah.
But it does at least bring you to the doorstep. I've never really had weed necessarily take me across the threshold, but it's brought me to the doorstep many times. And so many people confuse that with crossing into that new realm.
Yes.
They think they're doing it because they just keep coming to the edge.
I felt like I was
It's like
visitor.
they're going to the edge of the water, but they never jump in. And they see it and they're like, look at that pool, but they never go in it, So to me, it's interesting to hear that the weed got you to there. And then it was, hearing someone who was a spiritual teacher that resonated with you to get just enough perception to be, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What if it's all these bongs and shit, you know what I mean? Which other people who don't smoke could tell you, it's just you're being a loser. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
But when you've done it yourself and you know that some of the therapeutic value and some of the benefits it's brought, like better sleep and things, it's not so black and white. So I think it's interesting to note that at that time, you reached a phase of like almost like overload.
Yeah, overloaded for sure.
Which kind of set you up to be able to see for just a moment, get a moment of clarity. Because when you think about it, all spiritual and personal breakthroughs come at moments of clarity.
Yeah.
Not moments of not clarity.
Is there? God, it's so good.
There isn't, right? I mean, I've never had a moment where I've decided something in total fogginess. Or if you have, that's how I broke my ribs riding my motorcycle. Like any crash I've had or problem I've had is because I'm hitting the gas in a moment without clarity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
No,
I think Sadhguru
that's
says confidence
absolutely-
without clarity. You know, confidence without clarity, you're fucked.
You're
He doesn't
fucked,
say it that
yeah,
way.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
clarity without confidence, you're not going to actually make the decision. So
He said that's delusion. If you're confidence without clarity,
yeah,
is delusion.
you're basically delusional.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to note, and this is kind of where our past tie in again.
Yeah.
Which is, so I want you to
Which is
talk
why
about.
I'm wearing this shirt,
Just why
'cause I
you're
wanna
wearing the
talk
shirt.
about it.
You should have told me how to wear my
Dude,
shirt.
look at how
but
old this is now.
we
This is
would've repped
almost
it.
4 years old, and
Way to put a plug in for that.
it was amazing because at this point when I found myself so low, I genuinely like was seeking for answers, and I was ready to accept help, but I didn't know where to turn. And out of all the people that I've turned to, I was telling my mom everything that was going on because I was so depressed and anxious. I didn't have friends around, and Mimi and I were doing a long distance thing, so we would either be on FaceTime in the evenings, or I'm talking to my mom and just telling her what's going on with me. And I genuinely went to doctors. They were like, "Yeah, you have." I think my testosterone at one point was like 150 or lower,
Wow.
and I was
Yeah.
like, "What the hell?" And so like
Oh, yeah.
hormonally, I was all fucked.
Weed does that too.
We
We'll
got to talk about this.
that. Yeah, the
Hormonally,
other-
I was
yeah.
messed up.
Yeah.
Anxiety was through the roof. They wanted to get me on antidepressants and anxiety medication, and I was like, nah, because I'd been through like PEDs and stuff, and I was like, I don't want to take TRT. I don't want to do all that. That's not like I've already decided in my life that I didn't want to do that again. And now in this low
Okay,
state.
pause before you hit your breakthrough, because I was going through my own thing at the same time you were.
Yeah,
just
so at this
differently.
point, the doctor is telling me
Yeah.
all this. I was like, nah, I don't want to do what you're saying, because I recognize that I put myself in this position. I'm this low because of my own actions. So I was starting to see that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find a way to get, if I was going to get better, I didn't want to get better by someone patching me. And I want to keep this as a disclaimer. Like, if me and Matt are different creatures in the sense that we're hard-headed people to begin with. Like, we want to do shit and we'll go really hard
Yeah.
at it. So I think some of that ego was still there in me. It's like, no, I'm going to make myself better. But for a lot of people, don't deny the medical advice and help if you really don't know how to get better. So I want to make sure that people don't use this as a model for theirs.
We're just telling our
But for
story.
our stories, like for me, it was like, no, I'm going to get better.
I think you realized that you took responsibility and said it
Yeah.
was my
It was my
actions
fault, yeah.
because you weren't depressed before then.
No.
And I'm guessing you weren't raised and depressed your whole life.
No.
So you knew there were times
that
when
word
I wasn't
even in my
depressed.
fucking vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, you were lifting. Yeah,
Yeah,
you were so up when I
Yeah.
first met you. So it's obvious that your actions put you in the hole.
Exactly.
So by logical conclusion, you thought I should be able to take action to pull myself out of the hole. And I don't think that's, medical advice. That's just like a fact of where you're at. It's different if you had chronic depression your whole life and had struggled with it. I know people like.
I
that
felt
too.
like, and one thing that I noticed, so I think I was always an anxious person,
Yeah.
but weed at that point was making it even worse. It was like, so I could throw this in now, like weed
Yeah, you want to talk about weed and
is
anxiety?
like a non, I put this in my notes, what did I say? It's a non-specific, what did I write here? Hold on a second. It's a non-specific consciousness enhancer, getting high. Weed doesn't decide how your experience is going to be. It's your state itself. If you are in a bad
interesting.
state,
Yeah.
you're in a messed up place, that can be worse.
Well, let me throw
know?
throw something on that just from my experience with my investing in marijuana, and I've had a chance to work in some farms and deal in the cannabis industry in Europe and talk to some of the pioneers, the European pioneers of the cannabis industry and the seed cultivation industry. And one thing I learned from them that was just a blessing is that I can tell you, the majority of anxiety that most people today feel from marijuana has everything to do with the way it was grown.
And how high the THC is.
That too, but even still, my experience and what I've talked to people in the industry over the years is that it really is synthetic nutrients and pesticides.
I can see that.
It's also the lighting that they use. Okay, so without getting too deep into all that, let's just say you can have marijuana where they say, hey, obviously no one wants to smoke something with a pesticide on it. Let's assume that everyone's feeling that way. The other issue is if you're smoking and it's pesticide free, but they loaded it full of synthetic nutrients, all the NPKs in there that they can just put it on, or they put boosters, which are all like other things that just help the yield because they want to make the money on the large size grow. That type of stuff breeds anxiety.
Yeah.
And I've been to many different festivals. I even helped organize one of the first organic cannabis cups in Europe. It's not going now, at least in the form we started it, but we did 3 years. And we brought people from all over the world to compete, to bring bud. And unanimously, you could tell when something's grown organic and they're using an organic fertilizer or organic nutrient system, the amount of anxiety, if any, is like brought to none. It's brought very, very low.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I was told, like, you know, and just for helpful tips for people out there, if you're smoking a joint and it won't stay lit and it's rolled well, then that's a sign that there's got some synthetic nutrients or it's been over fertilized. Another one is if your joint sparks. You ever smoke a joint and out of nowhere it kind of sparks?
Yeah.
I think that one's too much phosphorus, but I can't remember which. But if it sparks or it chronically won't stay lit, those are pretty good indicators that they've used some
just
heavy,
looking at bud and thinking it's fire.
Yeah, some heavy synthetic nutrients. So that's definitely something to be aware of.
Totally. Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because what was interesting to me when I started talking about weed in general on TikTok and on the internet is I saw a lot of young adults under 25, like 10 to 16, 16 to 24, that age group, where they were all smoking a lot, especially with the vape pens, because they're easy to conceal. And, you know, market has become more gray and people are distributing all kinds of street shit. And so kids have all these vape pens now and they're just distilled down to
vape
trash.
Pens are just,
and like, it's just trash, you know?
It's usually the weed
that's about to go bad.
It goes bad and they got to turn it
You know,
into
and then you go like, okay, well, and they're doing this,
secret.
they're doing this with hiding from their parents and all that. And a lot of them gravitated to the content I was making because I was like, if you're getting high and you're feeling anxious, you feel lost in life, you're confused, you don't know which way to go, and you keep smoking weed and it's making it worse. And they were like, how the fuck does he know everything about me? It's like, no, motherfucker, because that's what happens at one point if you keep smoking. And especially at that age, you already don't have any direction in life. Like, it's very different than when you and I started smoking weed. We were doing something at that point in our life. Like, versus if you have no, you know, path forward and now you're smoking weed, you added this variable, which, for a time makes you feel great. But when it starts to turn on you and you don't make those changes and you don't adjust because you're still not self-aware as a kid, it really can go sideways.
Still growing,
right? It goes sideways and anxieties go through the roof. And there's more kids depressed today than ever before, and they're smoking a lot of weed, and it's not fixing the depression. Like, it was never meant to fix the depression.
So let me chime into I told you to pause before you hit your little enlightenment moment.
Tell me.
Because at the exact same time, I was going through something, but differently. So then I was not smoking. I had stopped going to church and didn't feel like I needed to be religious anymore.
Yeah.
And my marriage was going to hell. And so at this time, my whole situation is crashing.
Yeah.
My business in Europe that I had doing some of the cannabis stuff and the organic distribution of organic growing mediums and things like that was headed down. And my divorce was finalizing. And at the same time, I started working with my brother in a construction company that I started with him. And within the first 16 months of me started, we over doubled in business size.
Yeah.
Like, we went from 20 employees to 50 employees. And like, my job was to do everything other than sales and marketing.
Which is crazy because you're so fucking good at sales.
Well, I had to just do all the other stuff. You know what I mean? And I started getting so stressed that I started turning to weed.
Yeah.
This is where the weed comes in to help me with my fucking stress. Because how do you bootstrap a company that's doubling in size, millions of dollars, and we didn't use any personal funds, any lines of credit,
no VCs,
no loans, there's no venture capital here. This is just, you better speed up collections, cash flow, like work on that whole thing. So my brother got to the point where he's like, I don't even want to look at the bank balance. It's too scary. And my sister-in-law, who did the books, would have to look at it, and then she'd come to me like, we only have two or three more weeks left of money of this whole company.
Oh, that's stressful.
And that was on me. My brother didn't want to hear it. He's like, you figure that out. And so when you're spending, $300,000 a year just on gas, you know what I mean? Like,
Jesus.
And your burn rate is so high, it was put so much stress on me. So what did I turn to? Old Faithful, you know what I mean? Start smoking weed. And what did it do? Here we go in the cycle again. I swear, we repeat so many cycles in life. It started awesome, stress relief, better sleep, laughing, hanging out with my friends, you know what I mean? And I'm like, yes, weed, right? But then as it goes on, I was going to, I think at my lowest point, I was going to a walkthrough at a job site. And I'm just driving along. Nothing's really going in my brain. And all of a sudden, I can't breathe.
Oh, shit.
And I feel like I go to check my pulse. Like, usually because when you're stressed, you check your pulse and it's like, da, 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 Instead, mine was like an erratic beat. It was like, da, da, da,
Arrhythmia type
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah. So I pull over on the side of the highway and I'm just like taking deep breaths and like maybe I need to do jumping
You're having
jacks.
a panic attack.
I didn't know, I didn't know that,
Oh,
right? So
yeah.
I'm just like, what the hell's happening to me? So I go to the ER. I go to an urgent care and they do an EKG and they're like, your heart's in atrial fibrillation. Like your heart's a regular heartbeat. And I'm just, freaking out. So you need to go to the ER. So then I go to the ER, right? And by the time I get there, I calm down. Everything goes back to normal. And they're like, well, you had it. And, you should be on all these medications just in case. And I'm just like, no, I don't want to do that. So then I'm like, what do I do? So then I started saying, I just need more CBD. I need more this and that. So I'm just trying to, like you said, whether it's in the vape or the cartridge or it's still marijuana based. But I didn't realize that the whole time, like these were not solutions.
No, they're just,
none of this.
It's a Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid. And so while you were going through that, I was dealing with that. And then you had a little breakthrough and kind of helped me get mine.
And basically what happened for me at that time, I was so low. I was talking to my mom, like, Mom, what can I do at this point? Like, I don't want to work out. I don't feel like even eating. I'm at the lowest I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
What the fuck should I do? And she was like, you should start doing some yoga. And I was like, yoga? What is this pussy shit? Who's yoga? Like, what are you talking about, Mom?
Yoga.
Like,
that's not going to help the problem.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
Mom, what are you talking about? This makes
Yeah.
no sense. But she's like, no, I know it doesn't make any sense. But she sent me a couple of videos of like the yogis in India who, and I saw the videos. I'm like, okay, whatever, fuck it, I'll try it. So like in the morning, I'd sit and okay, the fuck is this? Like, I get breathing. Okay, fine, whatever. But it's funny. I really was like, okay, I have nowhere else to turn, so I might as well give it a shot. So I would just do it every morning. And then one day I was I think I was in San Francisco and I was taking an Uber back home. And my Uber driver, it's older Indian guys, we're also great friends now. He was just doing it for fun. I was telling him what was happening with me and what I've been going through and how weed was like in my life and all. And he's told me like, I think you should check out this guy, Sadhguru. He does these programs called inner engineering. I think you would really benefit.
So that's how you heard about it.
That's how I heard about it from my Uber driver.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is such divine intervention bullshit, man. I'm telling you, this was real. He told me this and I'm like, this old man's probably got some good advice here, right? He's a whole nother chapter we can talk about. He's like kind of like you and me. He's done a lot of cool things in his life. And so I took his advice and I looked it up, and there was a program happening in Mountain View because I was in the Bay Area at the time. And I thought the whole time looking at the program that he was going to be teaching it. So I signed up. I was like, so this is in
You wanted to see the guru.
Yeah, I was like, fuck it. I'm going to go see the guy, because if I'm already meditating and learning about yoga, I might as well find the guy who's like the guy right now. And, and he's doing these programs. All right, let's sign up. It wasn't that expensive. I think it was like $200 or $300 or something. So I'm like, okay, let's sign up. But that wasn't until February of 2018. And this is like late 2017. So I'm already in this low place. But I had started listening to him like religiously. I found his videos very helpful, and all the stuff that he was talking about, how your mind and body are connected by this breath of yours, and how the system is like, if you're stressed, your system is out of control from yourself. You don't know how to manage your system. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I don't know how to manage my shit. What do I do? Like, tell me what's
so how do we fix it?
How do we fix this? What do we do, bro? Like, what's the answer here?
Yeah.
So all his videos were like alluding to, because I'm like,
is he going to sell you a freaking dime bag?
What do we do? So I go to this program and I show up, and I had no expectation, and I thought he was going to be there. He wasn't there. It was instructor led. I was a little disappointed, but I'm like, fuck it, whatever. We'll see what it goes, And I just, that's what they tell you on day one, they just tell you, if you're going to be here, participate fully and like let go of all your expectations about this or that, the other thing. And, we're going to give you the food that you should be eating, and we're going to show you everything. I'm like, okay, cool. So I went all in. And I think when I came out of that process, I just knew as a gut feeling, like this guy has just given me the basic principles, just like when I was bodybuilding and I got my first basic workout. I just knew that this guy just gave me the recipe, and he's given me all the right information that I need to know to now go and build myself back up. And they said in that 45 days, if you meditate twice a day, then you do it once a day. I think I did it for like maybe 55 days, and then I kept going to about 100 days or something. And this is crazy, because at that time I was so lost and wanted this direction that this practice became almost like a savior for me. Meditation, like doing the breathing exercises and just finding time for yourself twice a day to check in. I started to notice things were happening almost like immediately after the 30, 40 days.
Were you getting high during this time? with the
I
meditation?
was not getting high at this time.
How did you stop when you started meditate? Was it a conscious thing, or did you just
No,
start?
so this is when I picked up meditation, I had already put down weed.
Okay, so you put it down and we're doing the stuff.
I'd put down weed and I was all anxious and depressed, and to get out of that, this is where meditation all came into the picture.
But I will tell you this effect of getting off the weed.
But I'll tell you this.
You, yeah.
Because I felt so fucking like open after the first night of inner engineering, I did go home that night and I had my vape and everything and my herb vape, and I was like, fuck it, let me because I had debated, should I go to these events high? Because I'm like, maybe I'll be more open and more receptive to gaining everything. But I'm so glad I didn't do it, to be honest with you.
Yes, that's good.
But so I was like, at night I was debating, like, should I get high
Especially
before?
since they tell you not to.
They tell you not to.
Yeah.
And I was like,
No,
if they tell you not to,
I'll test them.
Let me test this theory out.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't get high, and then I went through the whole program, and during the whole time that I was doing the 45 days, didn't smoke even once. And I was starting to feel changes. I was starting to feel more in control. And I was learning different strategies now. Now that I understood the rabbit hole of yoga and meditation and how your breath is basically if you consciously focus on your breath, you can interrupt your brain. You can interrupt like how speedy anxiety and thoughts come and spiral. And it really became like a catapult for me. I was like, this shit's going to launch me into a good space.
It sounds like just like we were talking about, people said one thing about weed and then you realized, hey, that's not how weed is. It's this way, right? For you and for me too, yoga, you thought of one way.
I thought Lululemon's was yoga, man.
And then when you actually heard someone really talk to you about the essence of yoga, you're like, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, why is nobody talking about this?
I've never heard this from anybody. Like, what the hell?
Pretty much.
So during that time, I came upon... So I was having this, finalize my divorce, started working with my brother. The company started doubling. I'm just a single dad with 3 kids doing all this at the same time. And had went to a therapist like right before I got divorced to see if, my marriage could be saved. Didn't work out, short story. And I decided to go back to the therapist like a few months later to say, what if I'm crazy? What if I need help? Or what if, I just decided to be open to someone telling me who I didn't even know, what I should do with my life. And after doing the whole interview process and her doing my whole workup, she's just like, I got 2 recommendations for you. 1, do more cardio. It's good for stress. And 2, you need a spiritual practice.
Yeah, wow.
And she's saying, I'm not telling you what to do or even what I am. I'm just saying, what are you doing for your spirit? And I was like, shit, she's right. I used to be Christian. I used to go to church. I was so involved and I don't want to do that anymore, but shouldn't I do something? Because I have nothing, You
have nothing to like hold bigger than you. And I felt the same at the time.
So I was like, wanted to do meditation even before I heard you talk about it, because I thought, okay, this is a non-religious way to be spiritual. Yeah. So I tried apps. I tried the Calm app. I forget, all kinds of apps. I went to a Buddhist meditation class, and the specific one I went to was cool, but it didn't do anything for me. And halfway through, we're meditating about how only through Buddha can we obtain enlightenment.
And you're like, it's doctrine shit.
Yeah, I was like,
man.
man, I don't want to. So it's turned me off, and I struggled until I was on Instagram. And I saw your post, and I just saw a post that said inner engineering, and I thought it sounded so interesting. And so I called you, and I remember being like, dude, what is this?
I remember this call vividly.
Yeah. I don't remember it because to me, I just remember you hardly saying anything about it. Just saying, it's a really cool class, and some guy named Sound Guru, Google it, YouTube it, whatever. Yeah. And then we talked about other stuff. And for a while, I didn't Google or YouTube. But then like you, I got hooked on just watching. Once I watched one video, I started watching more and more and more and more. And it started making so much sense to me. I'm like, I'm finding it's because usually I'm a disagreeable person and I would like to be, that's bullshit,
Me too.
But I'm like, I'm not really hearing anything that's too crazy. Like, it seems to make sense. So 2019, he was coming to Los Angeles, and I was like, and you had told me when I did finally ask you about how it was teacher-led, and I thought, shit, he's coming to LA. And see, you did right by me by not telling me what it was. Because when I went, I didn't even really know.
I honestly wouldn't have even known what to tell you at the time.
Yeah, I didn't even know that like we were going to learn a meditative practice, I don't think. I just knew it was inner engineering, and they're going to tell us about it. So I did the online course, which was a lot of like intellectual kind of stuff. Think about this, think about that. It gives you a few little practices. And so when I went, I remember thinking like, and watching him the first night, just thinking, this is stupid. Because I'm like, I already watched all his videos. He's saying the same shit. I've watched 100 videos. He's just saying the same thing, And I don't know how much to get into on this podcast with my experience.
Whatever you want, man.
Screw it. Why not? So what happened? I'll tell you my experience of what happened. Fuck it. Why not? We're here. I came to all this time to come to the podcast. I might as well let it rip. So
You want to pull out some weed?
No. No.
We're all just going to be sitting looking at each other doing nothing.
Maybe later. No, but we'll talk about smoking today later, why we may or may not. So I go to this without much expectation with my best friend, because he's into this kind of stuff too. And
yeah, it's funny how you had somebody to like share this experience with.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful because it's also a witness to make me think I didn't think this up in my head. So I think it was a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, usually.
Friday night, we're at the LA Convention Center. I hear his speech. It's cool. He just looks like a tired version of himself. It was really weird. Like he looked like 10 years older. I don't know why all of a sudden. And he just said all the same things like in a different order that I've heard on every video I've ever heard him talk about. And I was kind of like disappointed. Like, man, I thought something magical or cool was going to happen. Oh, well. So we went back to the hotel room and we were sharing a room, save on money. 2:00 in the morning, I just bolted straight out of bed like someone had splashed water on me or something. And I woke up covered in tears, my shirt just like I had been crying in my sleep or something.
Yeah.
Just shot up out of my fucking bed, and I was so high and so positive and so felt like I had gone to like the equivalent of like 1,000 therapy sessions or something, and only I never knew what the contents of those sessions were, but the effects were felt, so to speak. And I even woke my friend Mike up, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I was like, like just crying. And he's just like, "Are you okay?" I was just like, "I'm better than okay." And instantly I could tell that many things just dropped off of me. And this is not like a plug necessarily for inner engineering, although I think everyone could benefit from it, but whatever resonates with you.
Whatever you find.
But the point is, I did this, and after I ended up going a year, twice a day, I was nuts about it. But from the second I was initiated into this meditation, for the first year, I didn't even want to puff on a joint. One time when I saw you, I would reluctantly, because I finally felt how much my own system could far outperform marijuana. You see, if your system is operating at a low level and marijuana is the best that you can fucking do,
life sucks, son.
Yeah, your life
sucks.
Like, don't think it's awesome.
No.
You should actually look the other way and say, this is the highlight of my fucking day. I can't raise myself to any higher level than this by smoking this plant or whatever the hell it is you got to do. So I finally had an experiential knowledge of being able to be at a high level. And for me, I hadn't done a lot of drugs, but it beat out shrooms. It beat out LSD, beat out weed, beat out alcohol.
And you could do it every morning, and there was no like crash from that high.
No
it was
crash.
just like you feel so lifted, so positive, and just ready to face anything. And you never feel like all of a sudden, oh, now I feel like shit.
No,
you
my
might
stress went away.
You might feel like, okay, it's just tapers down, but it doesn't have any crash. And it's like, you're telling me I can just get high, and like how Wim Hof says you can get high on your own supply by just doing some breathing and being like meditative by like focusing on
just doing some basic practices.
Like what we did in the beginning. We did Om chanting. That's one of the things that you do.
It's part of it. Yeah.
In this meditation, and like just by being more intentional about these things, you can spark up this insane state where you're just so blasted off and free, and you could do this by yourself anywhere and you don't need any substance. And it was.
Yeah,
it's like I don't know. People have to do it to really believe it. It's hard to give.
Yeah, you shouldn't believe it. You should be super skeptical. But hopefully that skepticism drives you to test it.
Test it out.
I mean, if you're willing to test weed or willing to test whatever the latest workout program,
for real.
Yeah, I got to a point where I was so high on my own supply that I had my own kids and just relatives and people wondering what the hell was wrong with me. I could, look at a sunset and burst into tears, like ecstatic tears, not sadness. I could stare at a flower for an hour if I wanted to and just be entranced with it, But so weed just took a huge backseat, and my stress went up. I mean, the bottom line is forget all the fanciful, I saw the fourth dimension or some shit like that. I stopped having stress. I stopped having panic attacks. I didn't need weed or even CBD. And I remember I was taking CBD that was helping me, that Charlotte's Web stuff that was helping with my stress. And when I started feeling so high for meditation, part of me was like, don't stop taking CBD. What if it's the CBD? I had that thought.
Yeah.
Oh, what if it's really the CBD that's helping you? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to stop the CBD. I stopped everything, tested it. And since then, I have never had a panic attack or a moment of anxiety. Yeah. And from that time forward, I went through many different real life tests, let's just say, with it, because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because we're sticking to weed. But But things happened to me. I'm talking people that wanted to physically assault me. I'm talking like extreme business pressure, people screaming at, yelling at, different things, to where I had such a sense of peace that like there's no way we.
I remember you were at a place where you basically couldn't be bothered by anything like negative.
You know,
I remember that. I remember like you'd be like, dude, I look forward to confrontations from customers at work. Like they call and they're all pissed and shit. And I'm like calm as hell, and I'm just like, I understand. Like, and I was like, dude, you're in a different like, level right now. Keep it, man. Keep going. Whatever you're doing is working for you. And not only that, for all the years that you were into like bodybuilding style working out, you took it so far as to like change your diet up completely. And you started to see like how your energy levels were affected by the food you were eating, and how all of that was just like just building on top of each other. And it was just consistently pushing you through this. You were really going through something, and I was looking at you at that time because I only bring this up. I only noticed that I started to fall back into my old patterns whenever I felt like, okay, I've gotten what I needed from meditation. I can stop now. And when I saw you and Mike later that year, when you guys came from your initiation and everything, I was like, you guys were telling me about how great it was and all. It sparked that back up in me. And I was like, well, I didn't add this in the story because I started smoking weed again when things started to get better. So I'm like, life's good. I should get high again. I'm down at the beach. I live at the beach now. All the things that I was upset about and worried about, stressed about in my life is no longer a problem because things are opening up. I fixed everything.
Weed again.
Now I can get high again. And that's exactly what happened. So I moved down. The big variable was that now I'm moving in with her, with Mimi, and she's now able to see firsthand how much weed I'm actually consuming. So that's a different problem now because you're like, wait, why do you smoke so much weed? And like we would have those kind of conversations, and I'm like, but it helps me. It's not a problem.
Why not?
I'm providing everything. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Like, hey, why can't I, since I'm paying the bills?
Right. You start going down those conversations, and it was good to have that sort of, resistance because it kept having me question my own beliefs about weed as well, until I started getting to a point where, of course, in the pandemic, every fucking person was probably getting high because there's nothing else to do. And I was too. But what I started to do, which was really smart, and it kind of leads me to one of the topics here, is I started tracking how much weed, because I was spending, before then, I don't know how much money I've spent on weed. I have no idea, but it's a lot. And when I started tracking in 2019, every month, how much I'm buying, the amount and the dollar, I started to notice, okay, spent like, I don't know, $2,000 in 2019. 2020 spent $4,000. Or maybe it was 2018, sorry, because it was 3 years of trend. It was doubling. And I'm like, holy shit. What am I doing with myself? Why am I spending so much money on weed? And then I realized, okay, I really need to change this. But this is when, again, it became more real to me, where quitting cold turkey wasn't the answer like I did the first time, where I killed off the plants and it led me to that dark place. So that's when I'm like, I'm going to taper myself off. So I went from doing it every day to now I only do it after 6 p.m. But then that was like from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. you're getting high. So it's like, no, now once a day only, right? So it's going to be one time at the end of the day. How did that work? It actually worked really well as a strategy. But then I was like, once I started to see, okay, now I'm going to go a day without it, see what happens. And now when you're off on that day, all you're doing is thinking about, when are we getting high next time, bro? Like, because your mind is now wired to crave for that shit. So now we're going to go, let's see if we can go 2 days without getting high. And those 2 days, all you're doing is thinking about, like, oh man, when are we going to get high again? But 3 days, if you can go without it, your tolerance starts to already change. And then if you do get high, you get way too fucking high. So you're like, okay, maybe I don't need to smoke so much. And this is where I started to come up with this idea, and I started talking about it on TikTok, was I want to talk about how difficult it is when you decide to make a change from smoking all the time to not smoking all the time. And what are the challenges that people face? And this is where these thoughts of track how much you're spending, because you'll be shocked at how much money you're pissing down the drain.
Let me back up even before that. And go to just the idea of wanting to even stop. Because my dad had a really great phrase he used to say, and it wasn't about weed, it was about a lot of things, and it's just one of those things that stuck with me. And he always said, whatever the thing was, ask yourself, are you a master of it, or is it a master of you?
That's so funny. My dad said the same thing. Yeah.
And one thing I think, and it works for anything, if you want to really find out if anything in your life is a problem, see if you can just stop doing it. If you can't lay it down, you know what I'm saying? Like, you think you're a sex addict, try not having sex.
My dad's the same thing.
Or whatever it is. Or and if someone ever challenges you, why don't you just stop smoking for 90 days?
But I can't.
If you
got a resistance.
If you feel a resistance to that, then you need to check yourself. Because whatever that is, you know what I'm saying? Literally almost, you got to keep breathing. But, with a lot of any of those other things, If us even looking to you now, is this the correct camera to look into?
Whichever, man.
If you're listening to this and we're telling you, see if you can stop. Can you stop for 90 days? And just asking yourself
if the thought
that,
creates resistance, there's a problem.
If you're even like, oh, well, I could, but, or whatever. It's not that that we're telling you should stop, like we're morally trying to preach to you. We're just trying to say that if you even have the resistance to that, if even the thought of stopping and you are immediately coming up with reasons why you shouldn't, that's how crafty you're going to talk yourself out of this. Like
totally.
Like you will and this is one thing I learned from Sadhguru, which is whatever you identify with, whatever you becomes your identity, and the stronger you identify with it, the more exclusionary you will be to other things. And your ego, your insides, I don't even like the word ego, but you will definitely fight for that identity. You will even kill people for that identity if it's strong enough. So the problem with one of the issues with weed is there's such a community around it that your identity becomes weed.
Yeah.
Like how many of the people you hang out with and smoke would you go hang out with if you said we're not smoking for the next 90 days, 120 days?
What's the number one thing?
What are you going to do? What are you going to do if you're not gathering around the fucking bong? You know what I mean? Like you might have to like talk about a book or go explore nature or like start doing other shit. But my point is you form these identities, you form these communities. And so then when someone challenges it to you, you have become in your identity
that's
a
so
smoker
good, man.
or a, you know what I mean?
That's true.
And it's not like you identify, like you go around telling everyone, hey, my name's Matt and I'm a stoner. But internally, you have an identity of like, well, that's just what I do. I've even heard people say, like I've had friends that said, well, just stop smoking for 90 days. Or I've done this with people I know that drink too much alcohol. Well, just stop drinking. And I've had people, I was in a relationship once where the person was like, well, you think I drink too much? Where you smoke too much weed? And I said, okay, let's both take all our shit and throw it in the trash and we won't do either for like 3 months, 6 months, how long you want to go. And I just took all my shit, threw it in the trash. And I was like, I'm over it. And they were like, well, that's easy for you just because you have strong willpower, but that's just who I am. When someone says
identity.
That's just who I am, like that means when you say that's who I am, you have incorporated that into your identity so close that you can't tell that drinking isn't you or smoking weed isn't you or whatever it is that you do, bodybuilding isn't you, or whatever.
That was my first separation from identity there.
I'm serious. It probably prepared you for others, but so definitely I like what you were saying about, then there's a whole strategy to getting off and why and what you go through I want to talk about, but I want to at least bring people to the door of
thank you.
If you even get to the point to even consider stopping, because when you think about it rationally, what's the worst thing that can happen to you if you stop smoking weed? And that's really what we're going to talk about now, which is you may face anxiety. You're going to be irritable. You're going to have shitty sleep for a couple weeks. Like,
not to mention, you've said this really well. Just because you stop smoking weed doesn't mean your life's going to immediately get better. There's probably a lot of things that you have been neglecting.
Yes.
And now you actually have to raise your awareness to see what are all those things that I've been putting off. And actually fix them from the fucking get. Otherwise, weed is going to be right back in your life immediately because you don't know any other way to deal with anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the number one key right there. It's like weed by itself is not going to fix anything, but it is the starting point for, like you said, if you don't see clearly 2 weeks, 4 weeks after stopping, like, oh my God, I'm actually a different person right now. I'm not even who I am when I'm high. Because this is an interesting thing I've concluded. We all have little personality voices, right? Some people have like multiple personality disorder, but all of us have different moods that we get into. But when you're high, you're oscillating between all those personalities so fast sometimes it becomes like it's your own entertainment show. And then when you stop getting high, you're like, who the fuck am I really? What do I act like? I don't know if I'm happy. And then people's default states are usually like some boring, like numb, like anxious, or they're just down and negative about everything. But when they're high, they can go from like that state to, oh, I'm so up. I feel so great right now. And then they'll go into a different mood and a different mood. So you get to experience all these different variety of emotions when you're high. And then when you're not high, you're like, man, I just feel dull. And this is in the early phases of when you get off of weed. You feel like, oh, I just feel like life doesn't have any juice anymore. Everything feels boring to me. All I know is to get high to feel anything.
Yeah, it's very
I don't know how to eat anymore. I don't know how to go to bed without getting high. You feel like, who the fuck am I right now? If that happens to you, that's a good sign.
It can really mess you up. And I think this is not an anti-weed podcast.
No.
Like we're going to talk about smoking.
We're probably going to get high today.
Probably.
Fuck you.
And we very well may. But I think you got to go through the whole journey to talk about it. So I don't want people to think that like these guys are anti-weed.
No,
it's like
not at
I'm
all.
actually not anti-weed at all. I'm actually saying I'm pro me. I'm pro you. I'm pro your spirit being strong enough, stable enough, having a good enough base, a foundation that you can enjoy all things of life, food, working out, sex, weed, whatever, and not have it turn into something that consumes you.
Yes.
But you kind of have to understand the nature of weed because it's so subtle. I have to say, it's to me what makes it so dangerous, if you want to call it, or so debilitating, is that it's so slow and it's so subtle. I think getting to a place where you realize, shit, I may have a problem because when anyone hearing this talking about stopping gives me anxiety or gives me pause. And then you break it down to how do you get off it? And in my mind, there's two ways. Number one, you either have a groundbreaking experience that just blasts you out of the water, like Inner Engineering or maybe at Muji or someone to where you get a glimpse of what life could be like without weed and how high you can actually be on your own supply. And then that helps you get off of it. Or sometimes in life for different people, you got to just dig your way out of the trench. You got to crawl your way out of the hole. And I think that's where you start talking there.
And mentally, like one of the strategies that I found is like you use the law of averages from wherever you are. If you're smoking 6 times a day, try to go to fucking 4. Try to go to 3. Go slowly down because psychologically, if you're not ready to do cold turkey, get down to less and less. So in the month time, you're spending more days without weed than with weed. So if you're going 15 days of the month high, you're not, on average, you're getting high too much. You need to cut that number down. So if you can go down to like, I'm only getting high 4 times a month, that's great progress. The next month you can be like, let's see if I can go down to only 3 times in the whole month. Ideally, we've talked about this. Weed, you said it yourself, is best used infrequently.
Yeah, just if you guys think about, if you guys smoking out there, everyone's taking a tolerance break because you realize you can smoke like 10 blunts and you're not getting anywhere. Yeah. So that tells you, in most people, it takes a couple weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. I mean, science will tell you for it to get out of your system. So if you're smoking once every 2 weeks or so, you're getting the best bang for your buck. You're hardly spending 100%. Anything. You're getting some of the highest high that you can get out of it. You're getting that initial phase, which is the best phase of weed, where you smoke it once or twice,
and you're just like,
and it doesn't have much deleterious effects because you're sleeping well and you haven't get into that habit.
Which is why I say it's a non-specific consciousness enhancer. If you are fucked and you're not in balance at all, it will throw you around the washing machine. Like you'll just be going for cycles of just shit. But if you've eaten well, you're taking care of your health, you're working out, your sleep is fine, you've taken care of all of your like work responsibilities, your home responsibilities, you get high, you're not going to be fucking anxious. You're not going to be in a different place. Because you haven't
done it all day, every day.
Right. And it's a different experience then. And so it's like in balance and moderation, it's one of the greatest plants to exist, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a little medicine, but I think...
But medicine can't be used every day unless you're fucking sick, and that's the
true.
real message.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's true.
You fucking abuse medicine, you're an addict, all right? Medicine's supposed to be a small... Like, you go to the doctor, he gives you medicine, it's not
for
permanent.
A week or two.
Like, take the shit and stop, right?
Yeah.
People are, but it's medicine. Yeah, well, what the fuck? Are you sick? Like, why do you need this all the time? That's the key right there. I love that.
I wonder if you would... Because we have different personalities, very much so.
I think we have similar traits.
We have similar traits, but I mean in the sense of like how we think about things, because I think getting off weed is very personality specific. Because there's some people, like I know I'm the type to go the cold turkey, like fuck it, throw everything in the trash and take on a hardcore challenge, and you know what I mean? But then there are other people that I think shouldn't do that and need to, moderate the amount or moderate the frequency, you know what I mean? And they can use whatever metric they want. Maybe you buy an eighth or something and you only one a month or whatever it is. And you're like, I don't buy another one. Because you got to also think about your finances and how that...
Finances play a big role. And I think for me, I've been trying to come up with strategies that would help the most amount of people. Because I think one of the hardest thoughts for many people is, I can't think about never smoking weed again. Well, you don't have to think about that long term. You just need to come up with a plan to spend enough time off of it so you can gain your clear, conscious self back, where you're not driven by the weed anymore.
You're not compulsive anymore.
Right. You got to get over that compulsiveness. Yeah. That phase is going to require you to stop for some period of time.
You want to consciously smoke it. Yeah. So we kind of need to give some actionable items, I think too. So. Like actionable item number 1 is how do you feel when we say we dare you to stop smoking for 90 days? How does that make you feel? And if you actually had to do that this second, like go to your wherever you're keeping your shit and toss it all in the trash or give it to a friend or whatever.
What would that create?
What does that how does that feel like? That's step number one. And that's your first little check, like do a test, you know? Then if you get to that point and say, shit, you realize I do want to attempt to smoke less.
Yeah.
Then you got to figure out, you know yourself hopefully well enough to know what your personality is like to see what should you do. Should you go cold turkey or should you try to slowly wean yourself off of it? But I also think problems with weaning yourself off of it, like my philosophy behind it is, and it may not be everyone's, but is that to wean myself off of it, because I already need a tolerance break, smoking less and less is, I'm not even going to feel the benefit. Yeah. And it's just putting off. If I just go hard at it for 2 weeks, as we know, after the first 2 weeks is the roughest time period, you know, the first 2 weeks when you've been smoking regularly, up to 30 days, but definitely the first 2 weeks, let's just get it out of the way. Otherwise, I'm going to take 6 months getting down to zero. Yeah. And as I come down to zero, I'm going to be smoking and not getting the benefit that I got before because I'm using less and less THC.
And I only use that analogy because once you start to see that, okay, I'm able to smoke only once a day. So why the fuck can't I go a whole day? If I haven't smoked for 23 hours and I smoked in the last hour of my night before bed, why couldn't I have just completed the 24 hours and see how I am the next day? And that gets people encouraged enough to be like, yeah, that makes sense. Why? Okay, let me just go a day without it. Now that you've gone a day without it, why can't you go another day without it? Now you start to see like, okay, you're building momentum. So it's kind of like just it's a negotiation tactic.
It's very much like weight loss.
Yeah.
I see the parallels kind of with the bodybuilding and the weight, in the sense of like when you're 50 pounds overweight, it is damn hard to get started working out because you haven't been doing it. You've been, you know, just overeating and not exercising. And so the momentum to get started is so difficult. In fact, your body's fighting against you. You're more estrogenic because you have all this extra body fat. Your metabolism's down, right? So it's just tough to climb out of.
And that's where one of the recommendations, which is always number one in my Discord community, is start meditating. Because if you have any anxiety about yourself, like getting off of weed and what that's going to create for you, and you feel like I don't know how to handle myself if I don't smoke, start meditating. Your first meditation could be something that you're like, okay, now I'm back to feeling calm again. Now you have another strategy, because before you had no other strategy outside of getting high to change your state. Now
Question for you. State. Yeah, now you just made me think of something. Do you think a lot of people smoke weed because they don't have a spiritual practice, and it's a way to connect to the realm of
I think it's a material way of connecting to fill a spiritual void. And I can only say that because I know for a long time I was doing that. And I was actually really adamant about it. And I thought, like, every time I get high, I'm getting closer to God in a sense. I'm getting closer to, like, breaking through to, like, bigger revelations about life. Because I was studying a lot of philosophy at the time. Yeah. And I was really into, like, everything I could about spirituality from all the different teachers that I could find. And I found that every time I got high, I was getting downloads of, like, signals from these other dimensions of shit.
Yes.
And you go like, wait a second. But then the thing is, you can never quite get it. It never kind of catches you. You know, you're always missing it, or you're not clear enough.
Yes. So let me say, quote a little Sadhguru there. Yeah. One of the things I heard him say about drugs, which was so great, is, in fact, in the inner engineering, they say before you do the Shambhavi Mahamudra practice, you have to make sure it's been, 4 hours since your last meal, 2.5 hours of snack, hour and a half after a drink, or 8 hours after weed. They actually have I remember when we went to the California class, and alcohol, because they're like, because this is California, we can say weed. Just don't. So he didn't even say don't smoke weed, but you have to be 8 hours out from using it. But one of the things he says about marijuana and mushrooms and ayahuasca and all this kind of stuff, and I think, I'm sure it's not true for everyone, but I definitely know for me, for sure, that drugs were kind of like a trampoline.
Oh, I love that analogy.
The trampoline, where you get to bounce on the trampoline and you peek over into the next level and you're like, amazing. Yep. But then you come back down. And so what do? You want to get back on the trampoline and jump even higher. So you have to take more and more because you want to do that. Now imagine we could just give you a ladder. And real spirituality is a ladder where once you reach the next level, you don't slide back to the previous level. There's no going back. And that's the really beautiful thing is we're so used to, like in church, they talk about backsliding. Like, oh, he's backslid. Like he was a good Christian. Now he went out and got high or had sex with whores. And now he's a backslidden guy, Like what's amazing about real spiritual progress is it doesn't degrade.
Yes, it doesn't. It stays.
You don't fall back,
No, I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And I feel like even now where I am with weed today, it's like I want to use it more intentionally. I want to do it. I don't think I ever want to stop completely, but I definitely want to continue to test myself in ways of like, okay, can I go without it? One of the ways I found is this app called Sh1t, where it literally just asks you to put in 3 habits. You just say, okay, did you do this today? Did you do this today? Or if you're trying to quit a habit, you say, did you do this? Did you not do this today? So every day it asks me, did you smoke today? And I'm like, cool. No. So I have it set to, I'm allowing myself once a week. Even that is a push goal. Because before it was like, oh, I could do it on the weekends, which is like some of people's weekends are longer than fucking weekends. They start from Thursday through Wednesday is the weekday, bro. Like, come on, man. What are you doing, bro? When is your weekday and weekend stop? So I was like, okay, once on the weekend makes sense. And then that became like a test to see, okay, where am I with this? And I'm still going to track my spend if I ever buy weed, which is good. I haven't bought weed in a long time now because I don't smoke as much to go through it as fast as I was before. So that's great financially. And you just I think you got to create more of incentives to build your life. This is something I learned really, it was interesting. You would like this about when you're overcoming an addiction. A lot of it's driven by your memories. If all your recent memories and your mind is bringing up all kinds of thoughts, which are basically memories, are about you getting high with the friends or something else you did getting high, then it's going to tempt you into getting high again. So if you're deciding to take a break from weed, you need to build up activities that you do without getting high and let those ingrain in your memory. And those could be the good ones, the 5 pillars that we talk about. Are you exercising?
Let's talk about that.
Are you eating right? Are you drinking enough water?
Yeah, we got to talk about the 5
sleeping,
pillars. Edit that in.
I think that's where we can kind of finish this up with, because I know you got to bounce too. So the 5 pillars and meditation is one of them, is what both you and I think agree 100% on, that those are things that you can do to balance yourself every day. It's not something like you do and it's done. You have to every day wake up and balance those things out.
Yeah, I just kind of thought about this because I love just breaking down things into smaller bite-sized chunks. Yeah. And something I was always, preaching at my kids is like, I've never seen someone who is very successful and personally optimized that isn't sleeping well, eating well, drinking well, exercising well, and having some type of spiritual practice or meditating. And I defy anyone to show me someone who does all 5 of those things really well and is just a piece of crap on the side of the road. A miserable person. Like, I'm not going to see it because, eating, how that can change your mind. Go watch all the videos you can on YouTube about what's going on with the food, right?
And the gut biome, everything.
Yeah. Sleep, drinking. People are drinking booze, too much caffeine, like hardly
Most
any
people are
water.
dehydrated.
Yeah.
They don't understand.
Dehydrated, sleeping, eating, rest. We already know what that does for your hormones and your irritability. And half the people I know that smoke weed are doing it to help their sleep.
Yeah.
But one thing they don't know is that although weed helps you fall asleep, you notice you don't really get into deep dream state as much. Some people get more, but I noticed for me, I feel like I got deep sleep, but I slept long, but it wasn't quality sleep, So sleep is huge. And then the exercise component. Show me someone who's doing something, whether you're bodybuilding or hiking or whatever works for you. Best workout is the one
you got to do something.
You'll do frequently. But the spiritual component. So I was able to do 4 of the 5 pillars. And for those years that I was struggling, I just couldn't meditate. So for me, instinctively, I knew what was the gold standard for me was to be able to meditate, because I couldn't do it. It was like always outside of my grasp. So I'd like to see anyone. So if you are going through the Discord group or following this program with Abhinav and his journey, I would definitely say check yourself before you wreck yourself. Can you quit? Oh shit, I don't really want to quit. Maybe that's a sign I should. Then develop a plan to start getting off, whether it's tapering off or just straight cold turkey, or whether you're going to use this app that you talked about. I'm sure you can post links about that. Then you got to fill it with something. You have to fill your time with the 5 pillars. What are you going to do today instead of get high?
Oh, maybe I'll cook some food for myself.
Something
go
healthy.
Groceries.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll plan to work out. Maybe I'll meditate. Exactly. All those things
Any of those
are filling up your time. I think what would be also good to end this with is, what are good ways of using weed if you ever do decide
let's talk
about that, because I think then we could give a healthy approach. Like, I think for sure setting is everything. Don't be trying to get high and go into a giant crowd if you haven't been smoking weed. You're setting yourself up for more paranoia and anxiety potentially if you do
Yeah,
that. You know?
I
So
think
set and setting has to be
set
one.
and setting. I think strain. You got to figure out what
Figure out the
strain works for you.
So you've done some research on this, like about like THC to CBD, like 1-to-1 ratio being better than.
Well, anytime you want to consume CBD, you should consume it with some amount of THC just for therapeutic effect. But I will say, okay, I like set and setting. I like finding out what strain works for you.
Okay.
Sativa usually makes people more energetic or cerebral,
But also more anxious.
active and more anxious. Some people, like I have a friend, sativa works how indica does for other people. More couch lock, more body high, more relaxed.
Yeah.
So you've got to find out what works for you. But before you even find that out, I feel like if you shouldn't be smoking weed until you built your foundation.
Totally.
Because this is not a foundational element.
No.
And I'm not a big thing on elements, but weed is not a foundational element.
Well, it is.
It's
Well,
something you add.
Going back to
top
the
of it.
beginning of the conversation, if you're not balanced, weed will throw you around.
There you go. Yeah.
So if you're not, if foundation is weak.
Weed is not one of the 5 pillars.
Yeah, bro.
Weed's at the top after you build your house.
Yeah,
out of
if
those
once you
pillars.
have
Yeah.
like a strong foundation, good armor, then you can go into some of these other things and maybe not be fucking thrown into the ground, right?
Yeah. So you're using infrequently. You're using the highest quality
That you
organic,
can afford to buy.
hopefully sun grown, and we won't get into what lights do. I know a lot of people could disagree with this, but I personally believe nature, there's something to be said with the actual sun shining on the plant and the life cycle of the plant and what it goes through and how it's shocked in indoor grows by forcibly being lit. And you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. All the
it's like a test tube
gimmicks they
baby
do,
versus,
Totally.
or being fed through, fed through intravenous needles as opposed to like eating wholesome food. You know, they talk about that. So if you find some good quality bud.
So we've got set and setting, infrequent use, find the strain that works for you. And I was going to say, try not to do too many busy things if you do want to experience the full benefit of weed. Like maybe when you get high, it's a good time
Connect
for you to
with
go
nature.
introspective, go journal, maybe listen to calming music, maybe meditate as well. Maybe really like try not to busy yourself with like, don't be fucking driving high. Like that, what a waste of a high that is. Like, what are you doing, man?
You got to create a ritual.
I think that's the way.
I think
you have
that's
to have
the
a
key.
ritual.
Yeah, you can't just haphazardly just be like, yo,
it's 7 o'clock. Or we just
or like you said, I've got a long drive ahead of me. Let's get high.
Yeah.
In fact, I think you should do, whether it's with me or someone else, and you should do a whole little segment that's just about this part that we're talking about, getting more into marijuana, specifically the strains, the types, how it could affect you, and that whole thing. It could occupy its own podcast, but I think just for this short version, it's good for people to at least think like that. But I think this podcast is more like that. This is more like getting you. It's not about quitting. Okay. I almost feel like this podcast is about setting a foundation and creating the environment for you to excel without the use of other things, substances, experiences. So you are solid in and of yourself, so that you can consciously choose to bring in things like marijuana in a ritualistic way. And by ritual, I mean consciously deciding and setting the setting and the purpose and who you're going to do it with and what your intention is and why you even want to do it.
Why do you want to do it?
Why you even want to do it today? You know
Very
what I mean?
important,
Like,
very
are you
important.
celebrating something, or you just literally want
I'm
to watch
bored.
the latest movie and just lay here stoned? You know what I mean? So, and I'm not judging that. I'm just saying
that's
very
when
few people
if you don't
consciously
have that
enter into
conscious
that.
effort, then it becomes into this habit you just do compulsively because you're like, oh well, I have nothing better to do. Let's get high. So.
Awesome. Well,
damn, bro.
thank you
I could
so
talk
much.
to you literally forever.
I know, yeah.
But we should wrap this up.
We got a joint to smoke, bro. Actually, I don't know. We'll see.
But for real, though, this has been really helpful.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming down and doing this with me. And I hope you guys found this useful. Let us know which parts of this you want to have more clarification on. We can always get Matt back and give you guys another episode of this. So thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. See you next time. Cool.